Not everyone understands how the Fed messes up everything.
Let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Why wouldn't they pick Bitcoin?
But I'm predicting that the capital markets of the United States are moving to Texas.
Ooh, Bitcoin needs fiat. Ooh, let's talk about it.
California is run by complete idiots.
Told me 2 years ago, Biden and Trump were accepting political donations in Bitcoin, I'd be like, no way.
China will probably adopt Bitcoin right before the United States.
I think so too.
To try to catch Trump in a lie. And now the entire country is catching the liars in their lies.
It's Mandana.
And Ian.
Welcome to Flirting with Bitcoin.
Season 3.
That's right. 3 years ago, I tricked Ian into a weekly date night.
I let you trick me so I could teach you about Bitcoin.
Well, it worked. I'm very excited for the halving.
You should be. Bitcoin's about to do what Bitcoin's about to do.
Ooh, okay then. Kian, can we start the show?
Okay.
Let's go.
Hey, Ian.
Hey, Mandana.
So the U.S.-Saudi deal has ended. You had an interesting comment about what that means for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's just another example of the slow-moving global bank run that is Bitcoin.
Yeah, I thought bank run was an interesting way to describe it. You said that Saudi Arabia is no longer depositing money in that bank anymore, and that bank is America.
Yes, that is the best way to describe the Saudi deal ending.
So today I want to talk about this global bank run. But first, what time is it, babe?
The current time is 8:47-8:21, and we're approximately 1,564 blocks since our last recording, and we are 7,821 blocks since the halving.
It's time for the Satoshi Price Index. Data brought to you by priceandbitcoin.com. Hey, Ian, if I gave you $1, how many acres could I get today on sunny Bitcoin Island?
Today, you could get 1,498 acres, aka Satoshis, on sunny Bitcoin Island.
That's really not a lot.
Pretty soon, it's going to be a much smaller number.
I'm seeing a trend here. What about the price of things that I could eat?
Yeah, so the Satoshi Price Index is comprised of eggs, beef, gas, cheese, and corn. And today you could get a dozen eggs for 4,700 Satoshis. You could get a kilogram of beef for 5,100 Satoshis. You could get a gallon of gas for 3,500 Satoshis. You could get a pound of cheese for 3,000 Satoshis. And you could get a bushel of corn for 6,400 Satoshis. Overall, since our last recording, the Satoshi Price Index is up about 2%. So things got 2% pricier since our last recording.
I think I can afford it.
Yeah, ironically, we were going to record yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and yesterday, basically, the price hadn't moved. So
Yeah, I remember
it
you saying
depends on
that.
when you record how much the Satoshi Price Index is affected.
Yes, it does. But it doesn't really matter. It's interesting to me that the Saudi deal ending isn't bigger news.
In 2024, you have to ask the question, whose news? The rest of the world, this is a big deal.
Okay.
The Americans and mostly the West are not being told how big this deal is.
All right, so let's talk about what a big deal this is. Walk me through it.
So we got to do a little history lesson first to understand why this deal even came about. 1971, Nixon took the United States off the gold standard, right? He came on TV and said, I'm temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Well, that temporariness never came back. It's permanent. They're not letting you get gold for dollars anymore. And when that happened, America started to inflate. There was a period of inflation for like 3 or 4 years. There's other things that were happening, but people attribute that decision to a significant portion of the inflation that was happening. And so what the deal that America made with Saudi Arabia, there's a very obvious purpose on the surface, but then there's a lot of nuance to it underneath, which is what enabled America to do what it's done over the last 50 or 60 years. The deal with Saudi Arabia fundamentally seems harmless. We just made an agreement with another country to say, you will only sell this particular resource of yours in our currency. So it's not an open market per se. Anyone with dollars can buy your oil, but they have to buy it with dollars. And that doesn't seem like a big deal in 1974 to the whole world because other things were going on, right? And in return, we gave them protection, basically, right? So Saudi Arabia was a relatively new kingdom, and there were a bunch of people surrounding it that were not friendly to them. And so we gave them weapons and training and, the United States military backing. And that kept that family in power until this day. The effect of only being allowed to purchase Saudi Arabian oil in dollars, in a way, it cornered the oil market for the United States dollar. Now, I'm sure there were people at the time that raised that concern, right? I'm sure there was somebody that was being silenced back then that was saying, this is a bad idea, don't do it, right? I haven't found that person. I'm not doing that research, but I'm sure that existed. But for the most part, America benefited from that the most. Because what that meant was that there was always a demand for dollars. Everyone in the world needs dollars to buy oil. That means that everyone has to come to the United States and ask for dollars, because this is where they're fundamentally created. Now, those dollars that they were asking for, as we all know, they're being printed out of thin air, right? So what you end up with is it gave the United States the ability to print money and buy natural resources from the world. And we've been doing that for 50 years. We've been printing up money.
So isn't the dollar then pegged to oil?
It's called the petrodollar.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not pegged to oil.
Yeah. Like as soon as I said it, I was like, but it's not. It's not pegged to oil.
No, it's not. It's not pegged to oil. It's not pegged to anything. No currency in the world is pegged to anything anymore.
Yeah.
Everything is a free float currency. So nobody knows how many units of any currency there is at any given time, but based on demand, right? Like if you're trying to buy products from Japan, then the yen becomes in demand. If you're trying to buy products from South Korea, then the whatever their thing is called.
That's true, yes.
I think it's also called the won with the W maybe. Becomes in, so whatever country has products that are in demand, their currency becomes in demand because that's how you have to buy those products. Well, Saudi Arabia was using the dollar. So the oil industry was already pretty big up until that point, but the oil industry has gotten bigger since that point.
Mm-hmm.
You end up with, there's this massive demand for a resource that's in Saudi Arabia, but the currency that's demanded to acquire it is created in the United States. And on top of that, Saudi Arabia also agreed to, well, as we're selling all these resources and getting all these dollars, what are we going to do with them? We're going to put them right back into the United States banking system in the form of treasury bonds, in the form of the latest version is like buying stocks in the stock market, right? We're going to participate in your financial machine. So we're selling the most oil in the world and all that money is going right back into the United States. And that's how, on top of everything else that's been going on, America really has just been up and to the right for the last 50 years, financially, economically, relatively economically, but mostly the financialization of America is largely in part because of the demand for dollars. And then what do you do when you have all these dollars, right? Like that's like what's been going on for the last 50 years. So Saudi Arabia has now decided they didn't end the deal. They didn't say, we don't want to do this anymore.
Right, it expired.
It expired and they're just not renewing it. It's like a cell phone contract, right? But what that means is that we can be 100% certain that there will be less demand for dollars going forward.
And they're exploring a CBDC, a central banking digital currency.
Yes, everyone is fundamentally exploring that.
The Project Enbridge.
I don't know the name of it, but if that's the name,
what it is. Yeah.
Great.
There's 26 countries that are signed on.
So,
and one of them is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
The CBDC thing is a secondary part of the deal ending. This is more in the conspiracy theory realm for me, but the CBDC is not happening. It's not happening. There are too many people in positions of power that would not benefit from that happening.
That's exactly what I was thinking. How can 26 countries agree to
I'm not talking about those
someone
26
pulling
countries.
the levers on it?
I'm not talking about those 26 countries. I'm talking about like billionaires, people who actually own companies, people who have money to spend on politics in multiple countries.
Are working on Project Enbridge?
No, what I'm saying is that CBDCs do not benefit everyone equally. They only benefit a small group of people, and that small group of people are the people that print all the money that basically make it harder for the billionaire class to make money and hold on to it. Like what we're seeing right now in politics around the world is, in my opinion, people don't realize that the fight is actually about the money printer, but the symptoms of the money printer are just becoming so glaringly obvious that they've had enough and they don't really know why it's gotten this bad. The CBDCs only exacerbate what's been going on.
Yeah, but you're saying they're not going to happen, but what do you mean they're not going to happen? They're not going to work, or they're not going to launch them?
Number one, I would be highly surprised if the United States ends up with the CBDC.
Really?
Highly surprised.
It seems like that's the route it's going to take.
I think that there's a lot of huffing and puffing and making it seem like it's inevitable and it's going to happen. I don't think it's happening. I think that the politicians are waking up to the scam that's being played. And at the same time, it's becoming a winning issue for them to be anti the things that are causing all these problems. For example, Thomas Massey. I've heard his name. I don't really know his politics. He put forth a bill, literally a bill to end the Fed. There's a bill going through Congress right now to abolish the Federal Bank of the United States. And in it, they lay out all the things that they've been doing to mess up the economy.
Wow.
And how basically, if you're fed up at the economy, here's why that's going. Like they are laying it all out there. You would not have
Put it in the show notes.
You would not have seen something like that 4 years ago, 8 years ago. I mean, this goes back to like Ron Paul stuff. Like Ron Paul was all about ending the Fed and he was the crazy guy.
Yeah.
But now there's a bill moving forward and it's more than one guy.
That's awesome.
And from what I understand, it's kind of bipartisan. Not everyone understands how the Fed messes up everything. And that includes elected officials because they're kind of allowed to be elected because they don't understand that thing.
Yeah.
Because if you did understand it, they would have somebody at least actively campaigning against you to make sure that you didn't get there.
Absolutely.
So these are people that are in Congress basically saying like, hey, there's a couple things in the government that we need to get rid of. What branch of the government does the Fed fall under? Is that Congress because Congress controls the purse? Is that the executive branch because they're appointed by the president? I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I would say is that I think Congress controls the purse. And if it's the Fed that's going to cause Congress to basically go bankrupt because we have to print $10 trillion, then yeah, you might be incentivized to be like, your decisions are forcing me to do things that my constituents don't want me to do.
I mean, it's just lunacy that the Fed is ruled by people who aren't elected and we call ourselves a democracy.
They're not elected and it's a private company.
Yeah, I think there's probably a cognitive dissonance that happens when the politicians in Congress get there and they learn that, and the staffers get there and learn that. It's kind of like, and then it's like, oh, this is how it's always been. Oh, okay. It's probably a hard thing to even mentally challenge when you are in that whole apparatus.
The reason why people haven't had to know how that works on top of everything else is because of the Saudi Arabian deal. Mm-hmm. There was always someone there soaking up those dollars that were being printed. And so you can run these deficits. You can run these, I mean, at this point, what is it, like a $3 trillion deficit? That's because someone is willing to loan you $3 trillion. Mm-hmm. And the people that were loaning that money were China, Saudi Arabia. I think Japan's in there. But like Saudi Arabia is not doing that by default anymore. We'll have to make a really good offer to them to loan us money. Mm-hmm. China's not doing that because we're basically declaring war on them.
We're not friends.
And Japan is probably going to be forced to stop doing that because they got their own currency problems.
Their economy is really
and so they're selling their dollars to defend their currency. So we're ending up in this like Texas standoff where everyone's like, I got to protect myself first. We've all been doing this messed up thing, which is printing money. And now everyone wants to protect themselves from the effect of it. So everyone starts selling everyone's currency and everyone's like trying to get out first. Mm-hmm. And this is what I'm saying is that it's a bank run. All of these things are people trying to get out of this messed up system. Like, how am I in this messed up system the most? Well, Saudi Arabia had this deal. They're out. China, how am I in this messed up system the most? Basically, we're the world's factory for America deal. Like, that's kind of over.
So going back to Saudi Arabia, like Bitcoin is on the table for them. Why wouldn't they pick Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is on the table for everyone because no one controls it.
Right.
So you don't have to make a deal with Bitcoin.
Exactly. But let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Why wouldn't they pick Bitcoin?
There's no reason for them to not pick it, except for the fact that, which goes back to a little bit of history. It's more recent history, but still history. There was a guy right next door to them who tried to use a different currency. He tried to sell his oil in euros, and we blew him up, Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
There was a guy in Africa who tried to sell his oil for a gold-backed currency. We blew him up, Muammar Gaddafi. So Saudi Arabia might want to keep that in mind. Okay, the deal can end, but you can't go make another deal that affects us. And making that deal with Bitcoin, even though that's not a country or anything like that, if they were to pick Bitcoin today, I don't know if
it would be like declaring war.
It wouldn't be declaring war, but it would be declaring independence.
I say that because looking at a news article about this, it says Saudi Arabia is exploring CBDC project Enbridge. And then it states like who the members are of it. I thought, whoa, there's like some U.S. allies on this list. So Saudi Arabia is like teaming up with other allies and they're screwing the dollar. And then I saw Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And I thought, oh, they're still working with America then, or at least that's the public narrative.
This is another little conspiracy story that I have. When I first heard it, it didn't really make sense to me. But as things have been playing out over the last like 5-6 years, that I keep remembering this little nugget that I heard, which is there was a meeting with like a bunch of, I want to say bankers, but like financial people in Hong Kong. And there was this guy that was like reporting on them all meeting. It was a very hush-hush meeting. You know how like they have these other meetings like the Bilderberg group or whatever, and there's people outside protesting because everyone knows it's going on. He was like, this is a meeting that no one's outside protesting because they don't really know that it's going on. It doesn't seem like it's a meeting like that, but this is the meeting. And what he was saying, again, this is conspiracy theory, but what he was saying.
I'm listening.
Right. What he said was in that meeting, the United States, or basically who would be representing the United States, and the representative who would be representing the UK got really angry and stormed out. And he said that what was said was that they're not coming with us. They're going to screw us over. And I watched this clip on YouTube like 5 or 6 years ago. It was definitely like before COVID, right? And I remember watching that being like, well, who's they? And I always took it as like China or Russia, like an individual. And what it appears to be is that like, no, they can no longer convince the rest of the world that this system that we're in is beneficial to everyone. And everyone, regardless of alliances, is like, I mean, I'll still be your ally if someone punches you in the face, but you got to stop punching me in the pocket. And
also your country's a mess. This is embarrassing.
I don't think the United States at this current moment has allies. The United States has people that are just waiting for the right time to walk away.
Yeah.
And what it appears to me is that the United States, and I don't want to say this is like the people of the United States, but like the people who are controlling what the United States is doing on the world stage, whoever those people are, the infamous they, whenever someone gets close to like walking away, that's when you see random stuff popping up on their borders or like, you know, random terrorism events or whatever. It's like the Ukraine war with Russia. That's a good example because Russia's trying to get away from this crazy system. This thing with Israel could very easily spill over into any surrounding country at any moment now.
It's very threatening.
It's very threatening. And who knows what Israel will do if, like, you know.
They all think outside of that region that for some reason Israel's going to stop when they get all
Yeah, exactly,
Gaza.
right? Exactly.
It's like, what? You guys literally gave them free reign and more weapons than they needed. What?
Whatever they're going to do, the point that I'm making is like no one truly knows. And what we do know is that the United States has basically protection over Saudi Arabia, protection over some other people, Qatar and some other people that we just have like a good relationship with. But once that relationship is officially over in like the public view, like it is over, then it's not so much that America is going to attack Saudi Arabia, but we might not help them prevent stuff.
Right.
We might not give them a heads up. We might not intervene in certain scenarios. And that is why I think that this exploring CBDC is what you're going to always see. Because that appears like I'm still on the team, but like I'm just trying to make it better for my people. Please don't make my day any harder. But will that ever go into effect? I don't think so.
Hey, it's Mandana. We're in season 3, The Having, and I'm making sure we drop a new episode every week. We are dreaming big for flirting with Bitcoin, and the only thing standing in our way is time and money. Let me be transparent and talk real numbers. Through Value for Value, our listeners directly paid us 100,000 sats in season 1. Season 2, we made 1 million sats. Of course, now we gotta see if we can 10x again and reach 10 million sats this season. Hashtag relationship goals. If we earn 10 million sats from the work we put into this podcast, it'll be the sign that one of us can do this part-time, maybe even full-time. Send us Bitcoin or shop our merch store. It all helps with the goal. You can also give us an old school shout out on social, listen to us on your favorite Podcasting 2.0 app, or make and share clips of the show. Your support in any form is value we appreciate. Go to flirtingwithbitcoin.com/support and let's experience value for value together. Howdy, Ian.
Howdy, Mandana.
What's going on in Texas? That wasn't bad.
I mean, do they really talk like that? If you're from
No,
Texas,
they
leave a
don't.
comment.
I don't think they do.
So right as the Saudi Arabia deal with the United States is ending and all of the nuance about that deal, Texas it appears that BlackRock and someone else who I forget at the moment are starting a new exchange, like the stock market in New York or the stock market in Chicago. They're starting a new exchange in Texas. And I find that interesting because Texas is basically America's oil energy production mega hub, number one. Number two, Texas is also America's biggest Bitcoin mining state, number two. And number three, if and when this Keystone pipeline gets completed, because it's going to get completed, I don't care what the protesters say, Texas is where that will terminate. So that all that oil that's coming out of Canada is going to go out into the world through Texas. What you end up with a combination of those three things in Texas is that it will be a very interesting alternative to the stock market in New York City. And one of the things that the stock market in New York City was benefiting from is that deal with Saudi Arabia. Because all of that money that Saudi Arabia had was fundamentally being deposited into New York City.
Right.
And so now BlackRock and all of their Bitcoin is going to be in Texas.
So it's all the ETFs.
I don't know what's going to be there, but if BlackRock is starting the exchange, you can guarantee that the only place you're going to be able to get your hands on the BlackRock ETF will be at the exchange
Interesting.
that they are starting. And if that's the case, all of the New York exchanges,
like Tesla would move there too, right?
I predict Tesla, all the companies that move their headquarters to Texas will probably move all their listings to the exchange in Texas. And there's a lot of things to this move that are, I don't want to say obvious, but like all of this has been in slow motion for a while. You saw companies leaving California, going to Texas. Literally elected officials in California were like, good riddance.
Yep.
That is the stupidest, like those people, California is dumb. Like they've done a bunch of other stuff recently that I won't get into, but like California is run by complete idiots. But anyway, they were pushing out and saying good riddance to like some of the most valuable companies in the country. Okay, whatever. So that started happening. And then COVID like accelerated that. So all these companies moved from New York, companies that we've never even heard of, but like, I think it was like 50 of the Fortune 500 companies moved to Texas.
I mean, moving to Texas is on trend.
It's definitely on trend, but there's reasons to do it for businesses.
There's jobs there. No, yeah, I meant for work.
Well, everything was moving to Texas.
Yeah.
And the reason why everything was moving to Texas is because Texas is different. It doesn't really work like every other state in the United States. One of the things that I learned that I didn't know, but my friend moved to Texas for a little bit, is that there.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who move to Texas and then leave, but they give it the old college try.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a long-term project, right? There were people who moved to Detroit and then left.
Yeah. It's very hot too. It's like you and El Zante.
Yeah, like not all of Texas is hot, but the places that people
Yeah.
apparently want to be are hot. That sounds like an interesting choice. But no, Texas is now home to the only reusable rocket company in the world. If you want to put something into space in 2024, you're giving SpaceX, you're giving Elon money. If you can't get on one of his rockets, then you go look around for whatever else is available. Texas is the only state in the union. It's the only state entity in the world that has that technology inside of its borders.
It'll be interesting if a lot of Bitcoin companies that are based in Texas are in a stock exchange.
There's plenty of mining companies that are listed.
Yeah.
Right? Like you
There are?
Yeah,
already?
there's like I want to say like 5 or 10 Bitcoin mining companies that are listed on the stock exchange, and they got different problems, right? Because now they're in that world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like mining in your basement, right?
Yeah,
it's like
why are they even in that world? That's interesting.
Because they have to raise money if they want to actually grow, right? So you got to go where the capital markets are.
Ooh, Bitcoin needs fiat.
Yes and no.
Ooh.
Yes and no.
Let's talk about it.
Well, that's not what this episode is about. The point that I'm making is there's a lot of things in Texas that don't exist anywhere else in this country, and some of them don't exist anywhere else in the world. And that is something that I think a lot of people are overlooking. So when SpaceX goes public, it's going public on this new exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Tesla might move to it. Oracle might move to it. What was the other company that's there?
Why wouldn't Californian companies move there? Like, why wouldn't Disney move there?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. But the point is that Texas is different for a lot of different reasons. And one of the things that Texas can do, this is more conspiratorial, but
I'm listening.
Texas, it would probably have to go to the Supreme Court. We'd have to argue about it, but Texas is allowed to create its own money.
Oh, explain that.
Well, Texas used to be a country before it joined the United States. And the United States was basically just giving concessions to get them to join because they didn't want them to be Mexico, and they didn't want Texas to go anywhere. So in the negotiations, they have in the agreement that Texas signed to join the United States that they could do that if they wanted to. They also have in that agreement, they have the right to break themselves apart into 5 smaller, I think it's 4 or 5 smaller states if they wanted to. So Texas, it's in the United States, but it's unique. And I think people like Elon, people that are basically playing this like high level, how do I get the most advantages in the world game, are realizing that Texas might be the place to protect myself from all this stuff that's going on. I just need to find the things that are missing and go add those to Texas. And so this stock exchange is one of those things. If BlackRock brings all of their Bitcoin to that exchange, and then we wait 10 years, that will be one of the biggest capital markets in the United States, if not the world.
Wow.
And once that happens, New York will end up like London. People still trade on the London Stock Exchange. There's still money flowing through it, but it all goes through New York.
Right.
When did that change happen? Long after the UK like declined as a superpower. This transition from New York to Texas, it's going to take some time, but I'm predicting that the capital markets of the United States are moving to Texas. And the implications of that are people who control the capital markets control other things, like what policy gets passed in the country, right? Like who you can elbow and tell, like, I don't know if that's the best idea, right? So right now, BlackRock has a pile of Bitcoin. They want Saudi Arabia to use Bitcoin, right? If Saudi Arabia announces that they're using Bitcoin tomorrow, BlackRock becomes trillionaires overnight.
So you think the strategy now with moves that BlackRock makes are Bitcoin centric?
I think over time, we'll find out if BlackRock is as greedy as we think they are. Because if they're as greedy as we think they are, they will eventually be doing all of their decision making around this pile of Bitcoin that they're amassing. And they will move that pile of Bitcoin wherever they're treated best.
So this is good news for Bitcoin?
All news is good news for Bitcoin.
What does this mean for the dollar?
Well, what this means for the dollar is that there's going to be less demand for dollars because Saudi Arabia ended their deal. So the United States has to either live in a world where there are fewer people that will lend them money, or come up with something else that makes people need to get dollars to get their hands on it. Now, I don't think it's AI. It might be, but I don't think it's AI. And I don't think it's necessarily SpaceX at the moment. It might be. But I think in order to get your hands on that BlackRock ETF, you need to have dollars. You can't buy that ETF with euros. You can't buy that ETF with yen. I don't think the BlackRock ETF is listed anywhere but the New York Stock Exchange, where everything is priced in dollars.
But why does it have to be the BlackRock ETF? I thought other countries were also approving their Bitcoin ETFs.
They do. They have. Australia did. Hong Kong did. There's like 3 or 4 that are floating around, I think. Maybe Brazil did. But the point is that BlackRock has the most. Fidelity has the second most. MicroStrategies has the third most.
So buying the ETF that has the most Bitcoin is better than just buying any Bitcoin ETF?
For the person who's buying it, not so much. But where that Bitcoin resides, I mean, it's on the internet and everywhere and nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But from a jurisdictional standpoint, if all of that Bitcoin is inside the United States,
Mm-hmm.
whoever has the most Bitcoin fundamentally inside their borders has the deepest capital market, because all these other currencies are going to zero against it.
Right. But why would someone in another country go and buy BlackRock's ETF?
Because their country doesn't have an
ETF.
ETF.
Okay.
Right?
But they could go to another country.
They could.
Yeah.
Which is why other countries are starting their ETFs. They don't want to be left out. But that is a more, in my opinion, a more equitable way of going about this.
Or they can just buy Bitcoin.
Right. So El Salvador, similar to Michael Saylor and MicroStrategies, is showing the world the hard way to do it. You can literally hold it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This ETF is literally like, I just cut a check to a large company. They take a cut, and it's literally what Fountain does for our ads.
Yeah.
They take a cut and they buy the rest in Bitcoin. And that's how much Bitcoin you have.
Yeah.
And here's an IOU that says, if you ever want, I guess, the cash you gave me, I'll give it back to you, but you're never getting Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a couple of companies are going to get rug pulled. Sorry, I think a couple of countries are going to get rug pulled. People are going to have to get rug pulled to learn that you have to hold it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do what El Salvador is doing. And what El Salvador is doing is basically showing the world that, and I said this last week or whatever, like they were calling that dude a dictator, and then they sent a delegation to congratulate him on his election.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's all because of Bitcoin, but give it another 4 years. If Bitcoin runs up in the next 4 years, which it probably will, and El Salvador becomes a wealthy country, forget the fact that they solve the crime problem. They become a wealthy country with their own pile of Bitcoin.
The world can't ignore that story anymore. The media of the world can't.
Like, I don't know how much Monaco is worth, but I'm pretty sure El Salvador is going to be worth more than Monaco very soon. Hey gang, it's Ian. Let's chat for a second. Bitcoiner or not, I know we're all feeling anxious to save more money lately. But do you want to know why you're feeling that way? It's because you're still thinking in fiat. Seeing the price of everything go up in your local currency, that's what's driving you crazy. That's where all this anxiety is coming from. Meanwhile, the reality is everything is actually getting cheaper on Bitcoin Island. And you might ask yourself, how do I get to Bitcoin Island? Simple. Bitcoin Island is just a state of mind, and you need to train your brain to think in Bitcoin. Your first training exercise is to set a Bitcoin goal using the Satoshi Savings Calculator made by yours truly. And your goal should be to always have more Bitcoin today than you did yesterday. It's literally that simple. This way, the amount of Bitcoin you have only goes up. And once you start to think in Bitcoin, over time, everything around you becomes cheaper. You'll be way more confident about the future. No more anxiety. Look, we don't need to overcomplicate this. You're still early, but you gotta be strategic. And you gotta unlearn everything they taught you about money. So go to flirtingwithbitcoin.com and train your brain to think in Bitcoin with the Satoshi Savings Calculator.
Satoshi for your thoughts, Ian. After the conversation we just had, are you thinking that Bitcoin's really going to ramp up and like game over soon?
I don't have the answer to that question. What I will say is that it only will take a couple announcements to literally change the world.
Yeah. That's
where we are right now.
That's how that feels. Yeah. You're like, and then this could happen, and boom.
Right. And we don't know what those things are.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't even matter at this point who it is. If it's Russia comes out and says, we're going to sell oil for Bitcoin, Saudi Arabia comes out and says, we're going to sell oil for Bitcoin. If any of these energy producing countries come out and say, you can buy
Or China says anything we produce, you got to buy it in Bitcoin.
I mean, they probably won't say that.
They'll never say that, but because they're
China
Bitcoin haters. But it would benefit them ultimately.
China will probably adopt Bitcoin right before the United States.
I think so too.
Similar to how Trump accepted Bitcoin donations, and apparently today Joe Biden is now accepting Bitcoin donations. So the guy who was literally trying to outlaw it is now accepting it as a donation.
That's crazy. Actually, if you had told me 2 years ago Biden and Trump were accepting political donations in Bitcoin, I'd be like, no way.
I don't know how far this is going to go. And I don't know who's going to give them any Bitcoin. Just the fact that it's like out there as like a thing is kind of crazy, right? So them accepting it as a donation is only 2 or 3 steps away from some country saying this is our, like we are so close to a new paradigm.
That's what it feels like.
Right.
It's a little exciting. You seem a little riled up in a good way.
Based on your Satoshi for your thoughts question, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I do know somebody is going to say something wild very soon. And the only reason I can say that with some confidence is because as we've seen over the last, let's call it 6, 8, we'll even roll in the Trump years, the last 8 years, this thing is all falling apart.
Really is.
The facade of how all of this works is falling apart.
And the people in power are so delusional that they think we're still falling for it.
Well, some people still are. So
that's true.
So like they get their confirmation bias because the places they go to check to see if people are still falling for it. Well, those people are still there.
Falling for it. Yep. Meanwhile, so many people are checked out.
They're checked out or they're getting different, better information. And it's really funny because who was it? Who was that press secretary lady under Trump? The blonde one?
They were all blonde.
That doesn't help.
I'm picturing
she
someone
said,
blonde, yeah.
In one of her interviews, she used the term alternative facts.
Yes,
Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah.
And they made fun of her for saying that, right? They were like, you can't have alternative facts. Like facts are facts. She just used the wrong term.
No, that's probably the business term that they use.
But what she said is what I just said, which is people are getting other information that does not go with what you're saying. So you claim to have the facts, but if anyone does a cursory check of what you just said, it's like at best I misspoke. And at worst, I was lying my ass off. Because they tried, in my opinion, to make Trump out to be this massive liar, they programmed everyone to double and triple check what everyone says.
Absolutely.
They trained the entire country to try to catch Trump in a lie. And now the entire country is catching the liars in their lies, to the point where Elizabeth Warren posted something on Twitter and someone used something she said to fact check her. Not like a random person, like, Elizabeth Warren, you said this. The liars, they created a world. They created a bunch of fact checkers. They programmed everyone to do it. And now they're doing it to them and they don't know how to respond because you can't tell someone to no longer check the facts.
It's not even that they're lying. It's that they do what they want or what they're directed to do. And then they go and they try to find some way to justify it.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's so sloppy at this point that their justifications, again, like you're saying, will contradict something that they've already said. And they think that we are so distracted and there's a lot of stuff going on to intentionally distract us that, like you said, some people fall for it. But with other people, and I think most people, it's just there's so much gaslighting that's happening in society around everyone right now that it's like.
Yeah, a good example was yesterday or today? I forget. But they had the Fed meeting and they were like, oh, inflation's at, and they said a number. I don't even know what the number is.
True.
There's no way that it's true. I mean, I went to the grocery store today and I'm like, what is going on?
I was watching this TikTok and the guy said, he was clearly younger than me, right? I'm turning 38 this year. So maybe he was 10 years younger than me. He was like, oh, I always wanted to recreate this sandwich from the movie Devil Wears Prada. It was 20 years ago. I went to the store and I bought the cheese. In the show, the cheese was I don't know, $8. And at the store here, it was $14, which makes sense, right? That's the inflation rate from 20 years ago. And I was like, holy crap. The fact that he thinks that's that is the inflation rate, but that's not what they've told us. And so it was so fascinating to me because I have seen
That is not 2% a year for 20 years.
It's not. And I have seen so many people who produce content who make comments like that because they're young. And that's the only world that they know. So they think that is a normal inflation rate. It's just like they know better, but I don't quite think they've connected those dots to what's causing all of this.
I think they've connected the dots that something is wrong.
Right.
And I would argue that our generation not so much didn't know something was wrong, but it was still moving slow enough where you didn't notice it. And like, okay, the price of houses is going up, but when you're in your 20s, are you really looking at buying a house? So by the time you get to buying a house, you're like, oh, these are the prices now. Okay, that makes sense. All right. But then if you don't buy it right then and they waited 5 years, they're like, what happened?
Or if you bought your starter home and then you had a child and you need a bigger house, that's like a 3 or 4 year difference.
Yeah.
And there are people stuck in their starter house.
Well, I mean, that's a different conversation, but the bigger point is that it's no longer, what do they say? The beach ball, they try to hold a beach ball underwater. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always pop up, but it's popping up in certain places, and housing is one of them. And so that's why it's so obvious to everyone, because everyone is dealing with the housing prices.
No, everyone is dealing with the food prices.
Everyone's dealing with both. But my point is that rich people don't buy groceries. Right?
I understand what you're saying, but there are a lot of people who have been living in the same house for a long time. Housing prices don't actually affect him. But people need food every single day. And so, yeah, very wealthy people, they're a small percentage of the population. But most people right now are literally physically having reactions when they are getting rung up for the groceries.
Yes, that happened to me today.
Yeah,
that
it's
is
like,
what I'm saying.
Why is this so much? What? I literally go, ooh, and the cashier is like, yeah, it's crazy, and it does not feel like it's stabilizing. Feels like it's a nice surprise. Like, oh, how much did it cost today?
Yeah, and that scenario was happening with the Saudi Arabia deal in place.
Well, crap.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that people are going to start doing and saying crazy things, and the world is going to react to them.
What if in like 3 months the presidential debates are happening and there's like a 20-minute conversation about Bitcoin?
I'll do you one better. Biden is never going to debate Trump. There's never going to be a debate. Never. They will not let. It is at this point elderly abuse if they let Biden get on a debate stage for an hour and a half. Like, you can't do it.
You really think that he'll go into the elections without doing a debate?
I think.
Wow. It's that bad.
Okay, one of two things. Neither one are good for really anyone, but either A, they let him do the first debate and he literally
they just shoot him up with cocaine.
Whatever. If he does the first debate and he can't even form complete thoughts and sentences, and then they use that as a reason to say, Joe, you can't run.
Ugh.
Right? But who's going to replace him? Who do they have? Hillary? Please give me a Hillary-Trump rematch. Oh my God, that would be must-see TV. She's not dumb enough to do that, I hope. The alternative is they don't let him do the debates. Trump basically calls him a coward until the day of, and then we just find out that, like, yeah, it was probably best that you never debated him. But there's no way Biden is debating Trump. There's no way. That is abuse. Like, say what you will about politics. That is abuse of an old man if you let him do that.
Okay, baby.
Because Trump is going out there to literally beat him up.
Well, no matter what happens, we, the Americans, are the losers.
We, the world, are the losers.
But we, the Bitcoiners, we're all going to win. Thanks for listening to the show.
Now, let's get you set up on Fountain so you can start earning some money simply by listening to podcasts.
Go to fountain.fm to download the app.
Once your app is set up, search for Flirting with Bitcoin and hit follow.
Listen to our show and episodes from your other favorite podcasts to earn your first Satoshis, which are fractions of a Bitcoin.
And make sure to keep an eye out for our promoted episodes.
You can earn up to 100 Satoshis just for listening.
Pretty cool, huh?
You can use those sats you've earned to send us a boost, like a little payment with a message.
And I swear, we try to respond to everyone.
Every episode, we shout out the top boosters.
To support us or other podcasters with more sats, you can top up your Fountain wallet with a bank card or lightning transfer from apps like Strike or Cash App.
The easiest way to learn is to get started.
Now you're all set up for podcasting 2.0.